So now that you've seen what you can do with the HTML heading element, the next one we're going to learn about is the paragraph element. And this is also related to formatting and putting text on our websites. This is what a paragraph element looks like. And similar to the heading element, you've got the opening tag and the closing tag. And in between, you've got the content that is going to be your paragraph. Now, the reason why we need a paragraph tag is because if you just had plain text in your HTML document, when you run the code and you see it on a website, what you'll see is something like this. The text, they run into each other onto the same line, and you can't actually tell where one paragraph begins and where the other ends. On the other hand, if we had created two paragraph elements for these two lines, then when we run the code, you will see them being separated with a line in between to be able to distinguish the different paragraphs. And this is also really important for people who are using screen readers, so people who might be blind, because what the screen reader will do is they'll see the beginning of each paragraph element, and it allows the blind user to be able to skip to the next paragraph easily and be able to see what's going on each time. Now let's put those skills into practice by trying an exercise using the paragraph element. If you head over to the course resources for this lesson, you should be able to download the zip file for the 2.2 paragraph element. And once you've extracted and unzipped it, then go ahead and put it into your web development projects folder and then open it up inside VS Code. I showed you how to do all of this in the previous lesson in HTML heading element, as well as the initial lesson when I showed you how to download course resources. So be sure to check those places if you don't know how to get hold of this folder. But once you have it opened up like this, then I want you to go ahead and open up the index.html file, which, as always, is where we're going to write our code. Notice here we've got three paragraphs. The first paragraph, the second paragraph, and the third paragraph. And then there's some placeholder text in Latin, which doesn't mean anything. It just is there so that you can see what a paragraph of text would look like. And when you go ahead and right-click and show preview, you should see that all of the paragraphs are jumbled together into one long line, and we can't tell where one paragraph begins and the other one ends. So now it is your mission to solve this problem using what you've learned about the paragraph element. So go ahead and format these three paragraphs using the paragraph tag. And once you're done, you should see the preview show something like this, where each paragraph is separated into new lines, and clearly visually we're able to see the difference and we're able to distinguish these three different paragraphs. Pause the video now, and once you're done, we'll go through the solution together. All right, we're going to use our paragraph tag. So we're going to put the open tag here, just in front of our first paragraph, and then we're going to put the closing tag at the very end of our first paragraph. And then we're going to repeat that basically for all of the other paragraphs. Now you can see here, I'm just clicking and dragging. Alternatively, you can cut it and then paste it at the very end of the paragraph. It really doesn't matter how you do it, as long as you get those tags in the right places. And now, hopefully, your preview should have updated, and you can see these paragraphs forming as we type. So this looks pretty much the same as our goal. And if you check the solution HTML, you should see the p tags in the correct places as well. So hopefully that wasn't too hard and you were able to do it all by yourself. And you've seen now what is the benefit of using a paragraph element to separate text into different paragraphs of content. Now, what you saw in the exercise are bits of placeholder text, And it's what we would refer to as lorem ipsum. It's something that you'll come across quite a lot, especially in web design. It's so that we don't end up with something like this, where we're trying to simulate content in a paragraph, but then we're just writing content, 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 or this is a paragraph, this is a paragraph, this is a paragraph. And the reason why we don't want to do this is because these are all the same words. The sentence has the same length. It doesn't look like what a natural block of text would look like. And we don't have the time or energy to actually create the content just for testing in web design. So that's why we use something called lorem ipsum. And lorem ipsum apparently comes from Latin classical literature by a famous author called Cicero, if you've heard of him, and it's over 2,000 years old. And this has been in use in the print industry for many, many years, ever since the 1500s even, where people started laying out newspapers, and when they didn't have the content for the layout, they would use this placeholder text. If you want to get hold of some, you can go over to lipsum.com, and there you'll find lorem ipsum even in different languages like Dutch or Polish. And you can use this tool to generate as many paragraphs or words or bytes or lists as you need by simply using this generate button. And here I've got 5 paragraphs ready to go to put into my new web design. Now, instead of having something that looks like this, where everything's all the same length, instead we have very natural looking paragraphs that mimic pretty much what a regular English article would look like. And this is done in a matter of seconds using lorem ipsum. Now, if lorem ipsum is a little bit too boring for you, there's actually some novelty versions of this. One of my favorite is baconipsum.com. And it will generate similar to lorem ipsum, but then you'll get words like bacon and flank and pork loin and pork belly. Now, if you're not a meat eater, then maybe you should try something like broipsum.com, where you can have all of the bro terminology in a lorem ipsum format. And apparently, the things that bros say are things like taco, pow pow, and washboard, and rail, and heli pow pow, whatever it may be. And if none of these take your fancy, then I recommend going onto Google, and you can actually find more of these kind of things by just searching for funny lorem ipsum. And there's a whole bunch of different ones like vegan ipsum or pirate ipsum, and you'll come across all sorts of different placeholder text generators. But the important thing is you know how to get hold of them, and you can use it in your code. So as an add-on challenge, if you want to, you can generate your own version of lorem ipsum or bacon ipsum or bro ipsum, and you can create an article using the paragraph tag and the lorem ipsum that you've generated. Feel free to modify the index.html in the coding exercise that we just completed. So have a play around with that, and be sure to comment in the Q&A sections below if you find some lorem ipsum that you think is ridiculous or really funny or really cool. And I'll see you on the next lesson. Hey guys, in the previous lesson you've learned a lot about different types of HTML elements, and you already got started using them to create websites. Now in this section we're going to take it a little bit further and explore some more intermediate and advanced concepts in HTML. We're going to get started in this lesson by learning about list elements, the ordered and unordered lists. Now, if you spend any time around on the internet recently, you'll notice that it's completely full of lists. If you go onto BuzzFeed or any of these sort of clickbaity articles, usually they'll create a list of something, such as great items that must have been invented by geniuses. But also, if you look at something like the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives, this is also created in this website using a list. So how do we create these lists ourselves? Well, let's start off with one of the most common types, the unordered list. And it's super simple to create. Simply you have a starting tag with UL and then have a closing tag. Now, normally we've had one-line elements such as this, where we get to add some content in between the open and closing tags. Now in this case, however, it's a little bit different. They actually go on separate lines because in between these two open and closing tags, we need an extra type of tag in order to complete this unordered list. And these are called list items. So here you can see we've got 3 list items, and each of them contain some piece of content. But all 3 items are enclosed inside this unordered list. So for any list to work and display content, then you're going to have to add list items into it. So what does this look like if we actually run the code? Well, this is what you would see. Essentially, unordered list items will create these bullet points, because such as in the case of a shopping list here, the order of the items doesn't matter. So that's why an unordered list would be perfect for this situation. However, on the other hand, if you needed your list items to be arranged in a particular order, then you would create an ordered list. And once you've added the list items inside there, what this will do is it will give you numbers. So it would start from 1, and the number next to each list item will depend on the order that you put into this ordered list element. If this milk was down here, then it would get the number 3, and so on and so forth. That's all pretty simple. So if we compare the ordered list, the OL element, that gives us numbers, and versus the UL, the unordered list item, which just gives us bullet points. Simple as that. And coming back to our FBI 10 Most Wanted Fugitives website, you can see they actually created this website using lists. So when you right click on any of these images and select inspect, you can see that each of these photos are actually a list item placed inside an unordered list. Now there's a whole bunch more to this website which we're going to learn in future lessons, but the really important thing is for you to see that this is a really important part that you see in websites all over on the internet. So it's really important that we understand how to use them.
Once you've downloaded and extracted the folder 3.0 list elements and dragged it into VS Code or your web development projects folder, then you should be able to see it here on the file explorer on the left. If we explore some of the files for this current coding exercise, you can see we've got an index.html that contains some plain text, which you're going to be formatting into lists. And if we take a look at the goal, feel free to choose whichever heading sizes you want. But for me, I think it made the most sense to have one H1 and then the ingredients and the instructions as H2s, and then any other headings like this part and this part as H3s. But the most important thing I care about in this exercise is you manage to create these lists. So we've got an unordered list for the section 1 of the ingredients to create the dough. And then we've got another unordered list for the filling ingredients. And finally, we've got all the rest of the instructions as a ordered list. Think about how you're going to create this. And don't worry about typing all the text out, because if you look inside the index.html, you'll see all the text typed out for you already. All you need to do is to add the HTML tags and to format the document into an HTML website. And in the end, we should end up with this recipe website for creating delicious cinnamon rolls. Now, if you watched my recent Instagram takeover of the Udemy account, you'll see me making the same cinnamon rolls. And if you want to do the same, then this is the recipe for you. This is what you're aiming for. And using what you've learned about list elements, I want you to go ahead and pause the video and complete this challenge. All right, so did you manage to do that? Let's go ahead and walk through the solution together. So I'm going to show the preview on the right side so you can see the website update as I type. First, we're going to start off with our heading tags. So I'm just going to add a bunch of headings in quite quickly. All right, so that's all the headings out of the way. So now we're on to the proper work, which is creating our list. As I said, the ingredients don't really need an order, so we're going to create an unordered list. So in between our start and end UL tags, we're going to have each of these as a list item. So I'm going to create the list item tag, and once I've created that, then all I need to do is to drag my first list item in between the list item. Now, if clicking and dragging doesn't work for you, if this doesn't show up, then you can also just right click, copy and paste. That also works. Now, I need to do this many times. So for efficiency's sake, I'm just going to paste in another 4 or 5 of these and drag in all of the other ingredients into each of these list items. Now, when you're actually coding this from scratch, you won't need to do all of this dragging because you'll be typing your list item and then you'll be writing your item name in here like so. But because we've written all the text for you, hopefully to save you some time so that you're actually doing more coding and less sort of busy work, then this is how we do it. Again, for the filling, we've got another unordered list, and then inside there are 3 list items. So let me go ahead and paste those 3 list items in and drag each of them in between the tags like so. So now we've got our ingredients and we've got our 2 unordered lists showing up perfectly. Now all we have to do is to create the final list, which is going to be an ordered list, because if you think about it, instructions have an order, right? You can't first bake the thing if you haven't created it yet. Inside this ordered list, we again need these list item elements, and we need to create as many of them as we have steps. So I'm going to drag each of the lines into the list elements. And there we have it. We've got all of our list items and all of our instructions showing up perfectly inside an ordered list. And if we check against the goal, then you can see we've pretty much completed everything perfectly. Now, one thing to talk about at this point is notice how some HTML elements are one line and other HTML elements are on multiple lines. When you paste long lines of text in between the start and end tags of an element, sometimes VS Code will automatically put the closing tag onto the next line. Now you can edit this so that it all goes onto the same line, or you can purposely make sure they're on different lines and you see it being sandwiched between the open and closing tags. Now, this is a personal preference, so it really doesn't matter how you want to do this. So you can do this however you like. But for me, I like to have list items all on the same line. This just kind of helps me see visually how many list items I have, and it doesn't clutter up the list with all of these list items. So have a think about whether if you like to see your elements like this, all on one line with the content enclosed, or if you prefer to have it like this, where things are more indented and you have the content in between 2 lines of your list item. In the next lesson, we're going to talk a little bit more about this type of indentation. So don't worry if that doesn't make sense just yet. We're going to talk about nesting and we're going to talk about indentation of HTML elements. So once you're ready, head over to the next lesson and we'll continue from there.